welcome to Doug in Exile. This is where the happy patriots are. I'm going to show you how the Democrat Party cannot be trusted anymore. They are anti-American, anti-capitalist. They're running on anti-capitalism now. And that brand has destroyed the party. It's gone. So this is nearly a happy victory. We have to make sure that they remain destroyed because they will come up from the mud and imprison us all. Okay, here's Chuck Todd. These are news journalists, but they're always the last to know. So as a Democrat, now he realizes that the party is insane, that they're going to lose all these elections, that they're going to try to make a big tent with someone as bad as AOC, anti-capitalism, and then also hold in the anti-Trump people. They're going to try and build it with what? Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger. It's not going to work.
Is the Democratic Party a left of center party?
Hold on. That's Charlie Rose. Fired for groping women at PBS. That's what our tax dollars were paying for.
I think you've just hit I think this is the identity crisis that they have. I think it's just a collection of people that don't like Trump right now, right? And that's served them well in 20. But imagine trying to create a big tent that had AOC and John Kasich in it, right? You know, or how about, or Liz Cheney and AOC. You're sort of going to rip a hole in the middle, right? As you're trying to stretch that tent. And I think that's why they sort of have lost they're just, it feels like they're way too poll tested. It feels like that they're trying so hard to sort of keep their suburban voters. And that's been part of their problem. The growth in the Democratic electorate is in the suburbs, wealthy suburbs. And so the growth of the Republican electorate has been in the working class exurbs and actually in the working class, even in working class urban areas. And I think that that's been their disconnect, is that their voters are in one place, their messaging is in another, but then when they try to message to their suburban voters, they've sort of lost touch with their working class roots. So it is, I think that
because the rich white suburbans are radicals. Their growth was in the white suburbans, rich white elite suburbans, and they're lunatics. So they're the peg the needle, far left, anti-capitalism, the radical ones, even the radical elderly that are coming out in that no kings, anti-ICE. They wanted to, get rid of ICE. That's where their growth is. And the Republican Party's growth is in the middle class, lower middle workers. That's where the minorities came in. But people who, were paying too much for egg prices.
That's been part of the problem, is that their coalition. I think both parties' coalitions are too big. We would probably be a better democracy if we could have four major parties, but our system it doesn't support that.
Yeah, it doesn't support that. And then all that happens is the two major parties of the four end up floating to the top. So you'd lose the most radical right-wingers out of our party. And I think it's important to keep them in. Those might be some libertarians, Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz. I think if we can hold the party together, we have a lot more in common with the center Republican and our more radical right than the left does between the center Democrat, who might be old Dixiecrats and just, the old school Democrats, your Andrew Cuomo and Bill Maher, and then the far left radical, the Squad, Ilhan Omar, Jayapal, all those crazy radicals. We'll have an easier time holding our party together. We're more united on some kind of a principle of making America great again, I think is a better brand. Here's AOC trying to explain capitalism, which should terrify you that this is what she thinks is capitalism. It is truly baffling.
You self-identify as a democratic socialist and have called capitalism irredeemable, I believe. But what does that really mean?
So when you toss up these big words, capitalism, socialism, they get sensationalized, and people translate them into meaning things that perhaps they don't mean. So to me, capitalism at its core, what we're talking about when we talk about that is the absolute pursuit of profit at all human, environmental, and social cost. That is what we're really discussing. And what we're also discussing is the ability for a very small group of actual capitalists, and that is people who have so much money that their money makes money and they don't have to work, and they can control industry, they can control our energy sources, they can control our labor, they can control massive markets that they dictate and can capture governments, and they can essentially have power over the many. And to me, that is not a redeemable system for us to be able to participate in for the prosperity and peace for the vast majority of people.
Okay, this is called a straw man argument. That's when you create a straw man that is easy to destroy. So first, she redefines capitalism as being just something that is purely exploitive. You heard her exaggerate it, saying chasing profits, number one at all other costs. So even if it destroys people and destroys the environment, which is not what capitalism is. So that's easy to argue against and then say that is immoral. Yeah, the way that she phrased it, that would be immoral. However, that is not what capitalism is. But Democrats, are they going to go with a brand of being socialist and being against capitalism? Which, by the way, they're finally being honest that they're against capitalism. So at least there's some honesty in their branding. Will an American majority go for it? Now, here's that Mamdani. He won a primary in New York against Mario Cuomo. There will still be a final election, I'll say, this fall, but his win was a huge deal to go after someone with a huge brand like Cuomo in New York. And he's a Muslim socialist. He wasn't hiding it. It's not a secret. It's what he calls himself.
Some New Yorkers are thinking of packing up and getting out already. They call it the Mamdani migration. The New York Post is reporting that real estate agents are getting flooded with phone calls. Luxury real estate agent Ryan Serhant told the Post that his number one job will be moving people from New York to Florida again. And based on the results, clients are going to hold off on making any kind of investment in New York City. Lydia Moynihan knows all about this. She's a financial correspondent at the Post and broke this story. Lydia, I had a bunch of my friends over the weekend when they saw this coming saying, oh my goodness, I wish I sold last year. This is a nightmare. How could this be happening? So is this Mamdani migration a real thing?
I think it is, and I hate to say that. Look, what's not surprising is it in the wake of him clinching that Democratic nomination that wealthy people, really anyone with sort of a vested interest in the city, was exploring options of where they could move. Florida, of course, is a well-trodden path at this point, but what's much more concerning is the fact that people are actually walking away from deals. So people who were either in process of signing and purchasing an apartment or, potentially buying something in the future, they're walking away. And so for the next 4 months, I think we're going to see a decrease in the investment in New York City. Anyone with a business is going to be a little hesitant. And of course, that's going to be amplified for 4 years if Mamdani is elected. And of course, Laura, the irony is that these are the very people who he needs to be paying for all of these programs. I mean, the things he's outlined sound like Doge cuts, right? Money, millions of dollars to transgender surgeries for minors. And there's really no way that he can do that if, as I think people will, they're going to pack up and leave.
And he's also anti-capitalist. Is this what New York's going to do? The capitalist capital of the world is going to run this guy. We're going to go into more on this guy, but this is a huge sounding alarm in the Democrat Party. Really bad news for their leadership. This is a New York City mayoral candidate, Zohran Mamdani.
So when people say democratic socialist, right? And I'm curious what you think this means. I mean, do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. King decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's what I'm focused on is dignity and
Don't you mean a better distribution of wealth for all of Allah's children, like Sharia law? This guy is trouble. The fact that he's against capitalism and he's right there in Manhattan, New York City mayoral candidate. But it's okay. It's still a tiny minority of radicals that voted him in, but it's only the radicals that are voting.
Taking on income inequality. And for too long, politicians have pretended that we're spectators to that crisis of affordability. We're actually actors. And we have the choice to exacerbate it, like Mayor Adams has done, or to respond to it and resolve it, like I'm planning to do.
Okay, so he's going after Mayor Eric Adams. We have more on this guy. Here he is in an actual speech where this is Ian Miles Chong posted this. Zohran Mamdani says the burglaries are not violence and that violence is an artificial construction. Jailing criminals is the real violence in New York. Okay. Mayor?
Oftentimes, we've even found as legislators, when we go into these courts, the term violent crime is even used when people are stealing packages. Violent crime is even used when people are accused of burglary and there happens to be a housing unit in that same dwelling. So violence is an artificial construction. And we have to be very clear that what is happening here with these district attorneys, that is violence. That is violence of the highest degree.
What's happening here with the district attorney is violence. That is jailing people that steal. This is what Alvin Bragg ran on too. This is like a major losing position, I believe, of the Democrat Party. It's good that they're finally being vocal about it because I think more people can then vote and respond. Here's the same Mamdani over on Jen Psaki, where he's saying socialism can absolutely work in the rest of the United States. The Democrat Party is officially a socialist institution.
You are running on issues that are very relevant to people in New York City, the cost of housing, free busing. Some have projected, that this is the type of platform that would work in other parts of the country. I mean, you're a proud democratic socialist. Do you think that is a platform that would work for other candidates running in other parts of the country?
Absolutely. I think ultimately this is a campaign about inequality. And you don't have to live in the most expensive city in the country to have experienced that inequality because it's a national issue. And what Americans coast to coast are looking for are people who will fight for them, not just believe in the things that resonate with their lives, but actually fight and deliver on those very things. And part of how we got to this point was through the endorsements of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Bernie Sanders, who've been leading this fight against oligarchy across the country. And I think that in focusing on working people and their struggles, we also return back to what makes so many of us proud to be Democrats in the first place.
This is what socialists, which are just baby communist light. This is what socialists always say. They're fighting the oligarchy. They want to redistribute your wealth. And of course, the rich people like Mamdani and AOC and Bernie Sanders with multiple houses, they never talk about their own distribution of wealth. They always just mean yours. And they're going to roll that out to rural America. This is rich people in New York telling people in rural America, in farming America, we're going to redistribute what? Communist countries had always meant redistributing their farms. the fruits of their farms from my cold, dead hands. Here's Tucker Carlson shredding Jen Griffin and calling her a liar. This is a follow-up to yesterday's video where Pete Hegseth came after her and said she was the worst, even though she works for Fox News.
Jen Griffin is a liar, but also very liberal, a true Trump hater. To the point where I complained about her, and I really tried not to complain about other people at Fox when I worked there because, I don't like that, office politics stuff. But she was discrediting the channel. She was such a Trump hater, and it was emotional, like her internal memos, from the Pentagon, sources are telling us. Were like screeds. It was like, I'll just read Political Playbook if that's what, or whatever. I'll read Mother Jones. And I said to an executive at Fox, what are we doing with this Jennifer Griffin person? She's an idiot. She doesn't tell the truth. She misleads our viewers. And she's like a screaming liberal who hates Trump, who our viewers love. So what are we getting out of this? And it was like, whatever. It's like, boy, you could not touch Jennifer Griffin. I don't know what that's about.
I think a diversity of opinion in a newsroom is probably healthy. I just want her to state her bias. You can go on Fox, you rip on Trump and just say, look, I'm against Trump. Don't pretend like you're neutral. That's the lie. The lie is if you pretend that you're neutral. Here's Pete Hegseth he says, I'm pleased to announce that the United States Navy is renaming the USNS, that's a Navy ship, the Harvey Milk, who was a gay activist who dated kids, to the USNS Oscar V. Peterson. We're taking politics out of ship naming.
Well, I'm pleased to officially announce that the Department of the Navy is renaming the Fleet Replenishment Oiler, formerly known as the USNS Harvey Milk, to the USNS Oscar V. Peterson. We are taking the politics out of ship naming. We're
taking the LGBTQ politics out. We're taking the gay politics out of ship naming. That's the only reason why Harvey Milk's name was on there, was for a DEI agenda. And we hope the military operates above that kind of stuff.
Not renaming the ship to anything political. This is not about political activists, unlike the previous administration.
I thought it should have been called the Alex Jones. Or the USS Sean Hannity. How about that? I think it'd be the USS Rush Limbaugh. If we're going to get political, if they go political, why not we go political? The Wally George.
Instead, we're renaming the ship after a United States Navy Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, as it should be. People want to be proud of the ship they're sailing in.
Not proud month, but real proud.
And so we're renaming it after a chief, a Navy chief. That during the Battle of the Coral Sea in May of 1942, Chief Water Tender Peterson led a repair party on the USS Neosho. The ship was severely damaged by Japanese dive bombers, and the entire repair party was either killed or severely wounded. Peterson himself was gravely wounded, yet he managed to single-handedly close the bulkhead stop valves, thereby helping to keep the ship operational. In performing his historic actions and heroic actions, Peterson received additional injuries and burns, which tragically resulted in his death. But his spirit of self-sacrifice and concern for his crewmates was in keeping with the finest traditions of the Navy. And for his heroic actions, Oscar Peterson was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. So I would like to officially welcome the USNS Oscar V. Peterson to the Navy's Vessel Register.
So the Oscar V. Peterson, we got to remember that name. I hadn't heard that story before, so I'm thankful for it. And after all the lunacy of the left that I've been covering in this show, I'm just showing the difference in their branding, in their messaging, in what their party stands for. Contrast that with Pete Hegseth and MAGA, who represents a depoliticizing of Navy ship naming to acknowledging true heroism. Isn't that a better message for us to stand for? And then finally, here is Laura Ingraham on the lunacy of what explains that Mom D's win in the primaries in New York, who is a Muslim socialist. This is a little bit more color on that.
This view that the Democrats are really caught here in a trap of their own making, they really gravitated toward the energy of the squad, and they enjoyed that, even though they know their views were too far left. But now the party's gone left because they didn't really deliver. What do they do here?
Well, this is a big problem, and there is a lot of panic, I think, in New York generally in terms of what can they do, how can they get someone in the general election. Remember, these primaries were played with. This used to be in September, and there would have been a runoff between Zohan and Andrew Cuomo in the old system with much higher turnout. Right now you have a city of 8 million people. 400,000 votes one way or the other here is determining an extreme move to the left, because this, with a voting system nobody could figure out, because this has been played with and moved to like the dead of summer when turnout's going to be low and activists can win the day. So we need to get our election system back. And right now, I think this is a really bad turn for the Democratic Party if something isn't figured out here before Election Day.
No, they're going to vote him in. He's only going to get more popular in New York. We'll see what kind of shenanigans the Democrats try to pull to undermine that election. What do you guys think? Is the Democrat Party going to run on anti-capitalist, pro-socialism? And number two, let me know in the chat below, is that a winning strategy for these crazy leftists, or will not more Democrats just come over to the Republican Party, which I'm all for? Come on over, gang. We're saying you guys have lost it, and you're welcome to come and watch this show. I'm Doug in Exile.